I am Ned Stark. I plotted to murder his son.
What is to be done with this traitor?
Bring me his head.
A big question that people wonder is, what if Ned Stark lived? How would things have gone in Game of Thrones? These are stories, and then there are turning points. Moments so powerful that they don't just affect characters, they reshape entire worlds. In Game of Thrones, there is one moment above all others that changed everything. The execution of Ned Stark. It wasn't just shocking. It wasn't just tragic. It was defining. Because in that moment, the story made a promise. This is not a world where good men win. This is not a world where honor protects you. This is a world where if you play the game wrong, you die. And from that moment forward, everything spiraled. The North rose in rebellion. The realm fractured. War consumed the Seven Kingdoms. And far beyond the wall, something ancient began to stir. But what if that moment never happened? What if the sword never fell? What if Ned Stark lived? Because here's the truth most people overlook. Ned Stark's death wasn't just a consequence. It was a catalyst, a spark, a domino that knocked over every other piece in the game. Remove it, and the entire story changes. Not just slightly, not gradually, but fundamentally. And today, we're going to follow the change, step by step, war by war, choice by choice. To answer one question, what would Game of Thrones look like if Ned Stark survived? We begin where everything once fell apart. The Sept of Baelor. The air is thick with anticipation. Thousands gather, not out of loyalty, not out of justice, but out of hunger. Because in King's Landing, death is entertainment. And today, they've been promised a spectacle. Ned Stark stands before them, bruised, exhausted, but still unbroken. He has confessed to treason, not because it is true, but because he believes it will save his daughters. Because Ned Stark still believes deep down that mercy exists in this world. Above him sits Joffrey Baratheon, young, restless, desperate to be feared. Because Joffrey doesn't understand power. He thinks power is loud, violent, immediate. And in the original timeline, this is where everything goes wrong. Because Joffrey chooses cruelty. He chooses chaos. He chooses death. But in this version, someone intervenes. Varys, the master of whisperers. A man who doesn't care about honor or pride or revenge, only stability and survival. Behind closed doors, before the execution ever begins, Varys plants seeds. He speaks quietly to the small council, Cersei Lannister, and even indirectly to Joffrey. His argument is simple. Kill Ned Stark and you create a martyr. Send him to the wall and you create a prisoner. One inspires rebellion, the other buys time. And so when the moment comes, when the crowd holds its breath, when Ilyn Payne steps forward, something shifts. Joffrey hesitates just for a second. But in history, seconds matter. Instead of calling for execution, Joffrey declares, Eddard Stark will be sent to the Night's Watch. The reaction is immediate. Confusion, shock, relief, disappointment. The crowd doesn't cheer. They don't understand. Because mercy isn't entertainment. But make no mistake, this is not kindness. This is strategy. And in that moment, the future changes. News travels slowly in Westeros, but when it reaches the north, it carries something unexpected. Not grief, not rage, but something far more dangerous. Hope. Robb Stark still calls the banners because his father is still a prisoner, still dishonored, still at the mercy of the crown. But Robb is not driven by vengeance. He's driven by purpose. And that changes everything. Without Ned's execution, the North is not blinded by grief. The leadership remains stable. The objective remains clear. This is no longer a war of revenge. It is a war of leverage. And sometimes what doesn't happen is more important than what does happen. Because without the emotional collapse, Robb doesn't spiral. He doesn't make reckless decisions. He doesn't lose control. And that means the seeds of future tragedy are never planted. Because while the North prepares, while the Lannisters calculate, and while Ned Stark's journey towards the wall, the Game of Thrones is still played. But now, the pieces are moving differently. And the question is no longer who will win, but rather what happens when the man who was supposed to die is still alive. War still comes. It always does. Because even without Ned Stark's execution, the truth remains. The Iron Throne is built on a lie. And in Westeros, truth is just a weapon. The same players enter the board. Robb Stark, the King of the North. Joffrey Baratheon, the Boy King. Stannis Baratheon, the rightful claimant. Renly Baratheon, the charismatic usurper. Balon Greyjoy, the opportunist. But the motivations behind them are no longer the same. In the original timeline, Robb fights with grief, anger, the weight of vengeance. But here, he fights with clarity. His objective is not destruction. It is negotiation, leverage, control. He doesn't need to burn the realm. He just needs to win enough to bring his father home. Robb still proves himself brilliant. He still wins early victories, outsmarts Lannister forces, gains loyalty from the North. But this time, he's more careful, more deliberate, less emotional. And that single difference echoes through everything. If Robb Stark has changed, so has Tywin Lannister. Because Tywin is not reacting to chaos anymore. He's responding to a contained threat. Ned Stark is alive. And that complicates everything. Because Ned Stark is respected, trusted, believed. If he speaks, people listen. If he confirms Joffrey's legitimacy, the throne weakens instantly. So instead of crushing the North immediately, Tywin delays. He calculates, he manipulates, he considers something he never needed before: peace. Could the war end without total destruction? Tywin begins exploring possibilities. Exchange prisoners, offer terms, split alliances. Because if he can't isolate Robb, he can win without risking everything. Jaime Lannister is still captured. But this time, he's far more valuable. Not just as a hostage, but as a bargaining chip. And here's where the timeline truly diverges. Robb does not lose control, which means he doesn't break alliances impulsively. He doesn't alienate key houses. He doesn't create desperation. And without desperation, there is no opportunity for betrayal. Let's be clear. The Red Wedding wasn't inevitable. It was engineered. It was required. You would have a weakened Robb, a desperate alliance, and a moment of vulnerability. Remove those, and a massacre never occurs. The war continues, but it is no longer spiraling. It is controlled, measured, contained. And while kings clash in the south, something far more important is happening in the north. Because Ned Stark is almost at the wall. And once he arrives, the game changes again. The wall has always been the edge of the world, a place for criminals, exiles, men who have nothing left. But now, it holds something else, hope. Ned Stark arrives not as a lord, but as a brother of the Night's Watch, stripped of title, stripped of power, but not stripped of influence. Jon Snow sees him, and for the first time since leaving Winterfell, he's no longer alone. This moment changes Jon more than any battle ever could, because now he has guidance. Ned doesn't command, he teaches, quietly, firmly. He shapes Jon into something greater, before the world forces him to become it. And then comes the truth. The secret Ned Stark carried his entire life. Jon Snow is not a bastard. He is the son of Lyanna Stark and a Targaryen. In the original timeline, this truth comes too late. But here, it comes early, and that changes everything. With this knowledge, Jon gains purpose. He gains identity. He gains confidence. He is no longer searching for who he is. He knows. And now, we reach the most important difference of all. Ned Stark believes. When the Night's Watch reports strange sightings, Ned doesn't dismiss them. He acts immediately. Ravens are sent earlier. Warnings are clearer. And for the first time, someone in power listens. Instead of scrambling at the last moment, the North prepares. And preparation is the difference between survival and extinction. Across the narrow sea, a queen rises. Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen. Breaker of chains, mother of dragons. But when she looks west, she doesn't see chaos. She sees resistance, structure, stability. She is no longer arriving to conquer ashes. She is arriving to challenge a functioning world. And then the true war begins. But this time, Westeros is ready. The North is united. The threat is known. The leaders are prepared. Not alone, not divided, but together. In the original story, Ned Stark's death proved that honor fails. But here, it proves something else. That honor with time, with support, with just one different choice, can change everything. Because sometimes history doesn't hinge on wars or kings or dragons. Sometimes it hinges on a single moment, a single decision, a single life not taken. The long night ends, but not in desperation, in discipline, in unity, and that changes everything that comes next. The North survives as a functioning power. Leadership remains intact. The army is damaged but not shattered. Daenerys Targaryen does not arrive as a savior of a dying world. She arrives as an ally, a contender, a ruler who must now negotiate power. In the original timeline, Daenerys breaks because she loses allies rapidly. She feels isolated. She is feared, not trusted. She believes fear is her only path to rule. That's what leads to King's Landing burning. But here, none of that happens. The North is organized and not hostile. Jon Snow is stable and guided by Ned. Tyrion Lannister is not scrambling in crisis mode. She earns respect before demanding loyalty. This results in Daenerys not going mad. Not because she's different, but because the conditions that break her never occur. The final war against Cersei Lannister. Now the war becomes simple. Not chaos, not survival, but resolution. With Ned Stark present, no impulsive attack, no emotional decision making, no burn them all mentality. For instead, siege tactics, pressure on supply lines, negotiation backed by overwhelming force. The city falls, but it is not destroyed. The gates are breached strategically. The Golden Company collapses quickly. Civilians are largely spread. This is not vengeance. This is conquest. So how will Cersei die? Jaime Lannister kills her, who was originally the Kingslayer becomes the Queenslayer. Not out of love, but to end the war. This fits his arc best in a stable timeline. He finally chooses the realm over Cersei. Who takes the throne? Now we answer the core question. The truth. Daenerys does not keep the throne. Even though she helped win, this is the main reason. Jon Snow's claim is stronger. He is a Targaryen. He is also a Stark. He's trusted by the North and respected in the South. He is the perfect unifying ruler. And Ned Stark would never support an absolute rule by Daenerys. Ned would respect her, honor her role in the war, but he wouldn't allow unchecked power, support fear-based rule. Now we look at Daenerys' core conflict. Daenerys wants to rule, but she also wants to be loved. And now she faces someone the people naturally follow, Jon Snow. Daenerys will most likely step aside, reluctantly but rationally. Not peacefully at first, not easily, but logical. So why doesn't she snap? She isn't isolated. She isn't even betrayed. She isn't driven into paranoia. Instead, she's respected, challenged, balanced. This would mean Jon Snow, who really is Aegon Targaryen, will take the throne. He would be the king of the Iron Throne. The Andals, the Rhoynar, the First Men, the Seven Kingdoms protected the realm. It would only make sense. And his arc story would even be more beautiful from the beginning to the end, with help and assistance from Ned Stark. Looking at this story, it really shows how one decision, which happened with Ned Stark, could affect a whole story. The story of A Song of Fire and Ice. Now, if you love a lot of these breakdowns, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll have more coming, such as George R.R. Martin. What could the Winds of Winter be a benefit for if we had that book? What could that be? What could the ending be? And much more theories, which I know the fans, especially with Game of Thrones, would love. We'll also do other theories and other breakdowns on shows such as Dune, for example, where that's really prevalent with the new Dune Part 3 on its way. All of this in store.